our next panelists ready? So now I'm going to welcome to the stage Yarrow Kraner. He's the founder of Hatch. And Manuel, ROZAN, the co-founder of QWANT. We're having a conversation on where trust is heading in our digital world. Hi. Thank you. Hello. Nice to see you.
Merci.
Merci. So you each actually have very different backgrounds. Would you talk about Hatch, Yarrow, and would you talk about QWANT? Just give a brief description of your work.
Certainly. 1999, I started a technology company by accident. I didn't really know that it was going to be technology. It was based on the premise of connecting real people that were doing amazing things in the world. And from 99 to 2003, we grew that to about 1.5 million people as a social networking platform. And then that was acquired, at which point the 2.0 version of that was called Hatch. And it was aggregating real-life superheroes to come together and solve challenges for the world. A few years ago, I started looking for platforms that could enable and catalyze those collaborations for good, and couldn't find one that served our purposes, so we built one. So H360 is H stands for humanity, bringing technology back to the humans. And H360 is an AI platform that will enable and catalyze collaborations. And so I think that's why we're here to talk with Eric.
Definitely, definitely. Jean.
Hi, so my name is Jean-Manuel. I'm one of the two founders of QWANT. And before I founded QWANT, I had about 30 years experience in finance and basically listening to people and trying to bet on people who we thought were extraordinary at what they were doing. And so when I met Eric Leandri, who was supposed to speak today, in 2010, we had many conversations. We started a few different companies. And then at some point, he came to see me and said, look, this is the way the internet is going. It was supposed to be a place of power and freedom and knowledge for everyone. And that's what it's been for about 10 years. But it's now taking a different direction. And some of the largest companies are starting to do things differently and to take personal data on people and then to use them in many different ways. And he convinced me that there was going to be a need, and that conversation is 2010, 2011. There was going to be a need for a place on the internet that went back to the true and original values of the internet, and where people could trust that the company that they were using was not going to retarget them, not going to use their personal data, and give them an array of services and mostly relevant and good answers without doing it. So we took the exact opposite of what was going on, and we created QWANT with being compliant on day one with all the regulation about data protection. So what we don't do is we're not interested in who you are. We are not taking any data about you. We're only interested in what question you ask and what answers are there on the internet to the question you're asking.
Thank you. So now, I actually know your answer to this, Yarrow, already, but when it comes to personal data, right, if you look at my personal data records, that's my social media data, my health data, my financial data, my location, who I'm stalking on Facebook, all these things, all these companies have this data. Are we finally reaching a stage where you think more companies will allow the reins to be handed back to the people? People will be able to have more control and manage their own data?
Yeah, we're reaching a saturation point, and I think it's a critical point right now. We've a little bit been blindly giving all of our data away, and it's being leveraged, and we're seeing that. And there's a huge atrophy right now on larger platforms based on the realization and the waking up that your data is being so exposed and harnessed. And you also have a choice on a daily basis too, because sometimes that data can make your life easier when you give it away. But I think the idea that people are starting to realize is that it's your data, it has value, and there are other companies that are profiting on your data. And so there's kind of a reset that's being put in place currently through companies like QWANT and what we're building with H360 to put that data back into the hands of each individual.
So obviously everyone knows that, but what happens on the internet is that it's the first time that the users are not the clients, right? So these companies have realized at some point that they could take the data from the users and then sell them to the clients. And of course, it took a while for the users to realize what was being done to them, because no one is that tech savvy. And when there's massive retargeting, then that's when they start to understand and they start to not like it. So we're reaching that stage. And of course, there are tipping points, as in everything. There's been a big tipping point with the Cambridge story, and then people start to realize. So we think that the need for a place of trust is going to grow. And if you take two extremes, one, for instance, some of the large American companies, for instance, Google, takes all of your data. Another extreme, Quant, will take none of your data. There will be a need for you to store your own data and then to release it to whoever you want when you want it. So that's the third thing. And then we have a product called Mask that is going to help you to do that. And we think that's one of the directions in a big way of the internet.
So I'm wondering how intense the point of tension is between entrepreneurs like yourselves who are creating technology and search engines to empower people and to allow people to have more trust in the technology they're using and not be controlled completely through their data, compared to the private sector companies that actually profit from personal data. Are you facing much controversy or tension there in the work that you're doing, and what can be done to circumvent that in the future?
First of all, we are a private sector company and we hope to profit.
Yeah.
For sure. But we can think that we can profit while respecting a certain number of things and a certain number of values, which is what I've just described. I think the tension is relative to size, yes. So for a startup, we're very, very big, and for a global search engine, we're quite small. So as we grow and as we snowball, then the tension will grow. But the reality of this is because of the size of this market. Search concerns everyone, right? You have about 3 billion people who search on the internet right now, and then inevitably one day you'll have 6. So, if you have the technology, we try to build the technology, then we try to build the audience, and then last we're going to have the revenues. The business model of a company like Quant is quite simple. So even if we grow a lot, and we give an array of services for people where we never track them. We use artificial intelligence that don't track. We use map that don't track. We use mail that doesn't track. That's difficult to do, by the way. And so on and so forth. Even if that grows to be very big, that doesn't prevent the existing companies to prosper and to also be very big. It's just a choice for the user.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, please.
For our company, we're in a different state than Quant. I'm anticipating some tension. And we're, for that reason, we're moving very stealth right now and kind of popping up and plugging into influential communities one by one. Mm-hmm. But we're being kind of under the radar about that currently.
When we spoke a little bit at dinner last night. You mentioned the possibility of people being able to do whatever they want with their own data, not just for giving their health data to the medical practitioners of their choice and only them, but also perhaps people being able to sell their own data. What does a world like that look like? What do you think the possibilities are there?
Well, I think the world looks like trust. And when you bring trust back into this, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens, honestly. It's an experiment. And we have a lot of planned outcomes, and then there's what happens. But using a data clearinghouse so that we don't necessarily harvest the data, we're giving this a central point to create a tool set that can provide services to serve, not sell. There's a lot of trends right now in chatter about people that would be willing to pay a small amount every month to be able to utilize a service that doesn't necessarily harvest and sell their data. And so for that, they're going to be able to pull the plug in their data anytime they want to, take it with them, and we're going to be giving them these packets of their own behavior patterns and such. It's like the AI DNA, we're calling it alchemy. Mm-hmm.
Two things on that. First of all, we think that there is a space for a company like us to offer a family of services, search being the core one, but all the others that I've mentioned, and for people to just pay a certain fee per month, or for companies to pay a certain fee per month to have that for their employees, and then isolate themselves from retargeting and from advertising. So we think there is something. But I want to just give you a little number to think about. What is the price of trust and how much is it worth? For the moment, I will tell you the price tag of trust happens to be about $650 billion. How do I know that? Is because collectively, the largest internet companies, the GAFAs, have lost $640 billion of market capitalization since Cambridge Analytica, and counting because their stock price is going down every day.
Thank you. How did you figure that out again?
It's to take the market cap of the largest companies at the top, and you take their market cap today, 640 billion less.
Okay, thank you. So in addition to ensuring that Quant doesn't do personalized searches, this is good for trying to deter from the filter bubble.
Yes.
Would you explain to the audience what the filter bubble is and why that matters?
Well, in a way, if you ask a question to someone who knows nothing about you, then that person has to show you all the answers that the internet has and is bound to show the same answer to you and me for the same question. But if I know everything about your preferences, then I should logically tailor the answers for you and for you to the same question. So then after a little while, if I use that for news, what article do you read? For food, where do you go when you land in Nice? What kind of restaurant you go to? Well, the last 3 times you went to Japanese, so I'll show you Japanese, right? But that prevents me from showing you the last pizza that opened, and so on and so forth. So after a while, you make people be prisoner of some kind of a filter bubble, and you escape neutrality, and then you show them their reality. That's presumably the argument is that they like, that they're comfortable with, which corresponds to what they want. But it just happens not to be real life anymore.
Right. So something that really irritates me on a daily basis when I'm researching for my work, or if I'm just doing a random Google search about a topic or a hobby that I'm interested in, if say I Google Donald Trump and his views on Chinese tariffs, that article, a few articles will come up. Say I do the same search a month from now, the same articles come up. So we're really just in this place of seeing the same things over and over again. And this happens in our Facebook feeds, this happens in Google, but it
everywhere.
doesn't happen in Quant, correct?
It doesn't happen in Quant. That's one of the benefits. I'm sorry to always plug Quant, but I'm here for that, so you will forgive me. But one of the benefits, of course, if you use Quant, is after a while retargeting and the filter bubble disappear.
Yeah. So I want to get back to on the data side, the personal data, people being able to manage and control their own data again. From the perspective of there might be some tension and you're in stealth mode, what do you think will need to happen for more companies to participate this, and for governments and other private sector private sector players to become involved? There are interesting pilots going on in Iceland. There's a company called DigiMe that did a pilot on allowing people to control and own their own personal data. And I'm seeing more and more startups doing this as well. But from a macro kind of government, we run the world place, what do you think will need to happen? Will we need different regulations, or will it need to be just the voice of the people coming in and saying, we demand that we get to control our own data? Is it all of these things?
Yeah, it is all these things. I honestly think that maybe something pretty catastrophic might need to happen. Cambridge Analytica was just scratching the surface, and Eric just pointed out $650 billion market cap difference. That's one of those shock factors that people kind of wake up, and I don't know how long they stay awake or if this needs to be a repeated event, but awareness and consciousness and people like understanding what's happening is what's critical. That's the only thing that's the market cap is going to need to drive that. And not only Europe is way ahead of the US and the GDPR and the constraints around, and you guys were probably right at the forefront of that as well. But I would imagine it needs to happen a few more times, that people understand exactly what's happening. Like, oh, that wasn't just a one-off. This is going to be a continued wake-up call. So it's all about market cap, I think, and to regain that trust and catalyze the consumers.
Well, it just makes me think that the internet, in its essence, is supposed to be free and open source. But if people are if there are companies out there using it, and governments using it to do surveillance, or companies using it to capitalize on our personal data, how free and open is it really? It's not. It's kind of a catch-22.
Well, it's free and open to those that opened up the shop first.
Right.
You know, they're welcoming everyone through it, but there's only a couple players that really, in the first decade, got the head start, and now it's up to companies like QWANT and the one that you just mentioned that I hadn't heard of yet in Iceland, to really set the stage straight and give options for people. And I think that once those options are available, and I'm just learning about QWANT as of yesterday, which I'm excited about.
I'm happy I have 2 more users already in one. This is pretty good.
90 million.
I don't know about any of you guys, but we have 2 more users. No, so I wanted to say 2 things about your question. Is number one, we like disruption, we like events that shake people, and we like people to think of the real values and what's going on in the internet. So there will be more tipping points, and there will be more events, and we think that's of course good. On the other hand, I think one has to be realistic about where we are, and we are at the stage where the Internet is dominated on one hand by the American companies, fully supported by the American government from day one. That day one for them was about 20 years ago. Grants from the American governments, protection on all sides and everything. And then on the other hand, the Chinese internet, which is very big and very powerful and has, of course, its own idiosyncrasies. So the rest of the world, Europe, Middle East, Africa, but Europe mostly, has to either sink or swim. And the only way to swim is to have a mix of regulation, but that's not enough. So we are at the forefront of regulate. You know the story that the American invent, the Chinese copy, and the Europeans regulate. Okay, thank you very much, but that's not good enough. So the Europeans are regulating, but they need to also really, really strongly support European companies that can emerge and can be part of the answer. So we at QWANT, we think that the answer is not to have one company in Europe that's worth 100 billion, but to have 100 companies that are worth $1 billion. And if the European states want to help, they can do that. One of the ways would be to create some sort of antitrust laws in France, or in Europe at least, so that no company could have more than 70% of any market, which would then open the other 30% to all the European companies that are players in that space.
I also think it's worth just pointing out, since we're here kind of defending the rights of each individual human and their data, there's also a lot of people out there that really want to give their data to make their lives easier. It's worth just noting that there's another perspective. I mean, yesterday Amazon announced that they're using AI to essentially get into the healthcare game and taking your data for your medical records to be able to provide you potentially better services and
what isn't Amazon doing?
Well, I know, right? And they're getting in the game, and it's a little bit predictable, but in that sense, there's a large population of people that want their lives to just be made easier by giving that data over willingly.
Right.
As long as we know that we have that choice, that we're making that choice along the way.
But this is a very specific way that people are empowered to use their data for health, right? So that's something very positive for their lives or the lives of other people.
The Trojan horse for that purpose. But once that data is given to them, there's a long list of things that they can sell around that as well. So
we're running out of time, but I would just like to ask you both one more question. So we're here in the best interest of keeping humanity at the center of the digital landscape. So we're talking about, we mentioned regulation, what some startups are doing, what the private sector can do, but what about everyday people, again, that want to have choice, but that might feel like they have no choice but to be passive consumers to their phones or the internet, and they use technology every day, but they don't necessarily know how to get in front of it to make it work more for them. Are there tips? Are there things that people can do on a regular basis? Are there things consumers can do in demand of the companies that they get services from?
Every time you click a box that says you agree, read that. But that's not going to happen. Another thing you can do is go on and realize how many services in your life that you signed up for 8-9 years ago through Facebook Connect, and unplugging those and sign in through your email address. That's a huge one. But ultimately, I just think GDPR was a really great first step forward in trying to take that long list of things that you're subscribing to and accepting the terms to, and trying to simplify that in a way that we can all understand it without all of the legalese. and then starting to search through services like QWANT and identify where you have ownership over your own data. I mean, just search that.
Yeah, ownership of own data, that's one of the things I mentioned we're going to try to promote in the product of QWANT called Mask. But to answer your question, I think it's a mix. People realize the problem, but if they realize the problem and no one is putting a solution forward to them, and that has to be really the proactive marketing thing to do, then they won't know what to do. So they know they're being spied on one hand and they want the service, and they don't know that there's a service that doesn't spy them. So I think I have infinite trust in human beings. So I think in the end, people will be more sophisticated, more aware, and then more free.
Okay, thank you. Yes, we all need to be more proactive versus reactive, right? Yes. Right, okay. Well, I could talk to you both about this all day, but we just ran out of time. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for the conversation. Okay. Thank you.